Chancellor Carranza.
Buenos dias. Good morning.
How are you, sir?
I'm
I'm going to
doing
move
great.
to Richard, but once
Please.
a New York City Schools Chancellor, always a New York City Schools Chancellor. So, you did the job with distinction at a very arguably one of the most difficult times in the history of the country, in the world, in the city during a global pandemic. But I want to start with what you're doing these days. If you want to talk a little bit about that, I know you were the equivalent thereof in San Francisco, in Houston. You've been in the education world your entire life in some capacity or other. But what are you doing these days?
Well, first and foremost, Roberto, it's great to see you, and thank you for the invitation to have a little conversation. So, look, there's life after the chancellorship. So I joined an educational technology company called IXL Learning, and currently 1 out of 4 children in the United States and in the world are IXL students. It's a supplemental program. Really proud of the work we do to support school systems. So I joined as their chief of strategy and global development. So that's kept me very busy. But I'm also very excited about the fact that I founded my own consulting company called Carranza Educational Consulting LLC. So for the last 4 years, I've been traveling around the country, working with school districts, working with system leaders, superintendents, their C-suite administrators, assistant soups, associate soups, principals, around leading and leading for equity, what that really means, and empowering them to make the difficult choices sometimes to serve the students that they have in front of them, not the students they used to have, not the students they wish they had, the kids that are sitting right there in their classrooms. So for me, that's been just a labor of love. And I've really, really enjoyed working with system leaders across the country.
Chancellor Carranza, I want to take a step back because I want to talk a little bit about your interactions and what your thoughts were on the outcome of the presidential election, because you were the superintendent in San Francisco, and you got to build a relationship with Willie Brown and Vice President Kamala Harris. Talk a little bit about how you met Kamala, your time in San Francisco, and what you thought at the end of the day was the difference in the national election and what and the outcome.
So I think number one, and it pains me to my bone because I'm the father of daughters, that America wasn't ready for a female president. And as much as that pains me, and I hate to say that, I think when you look at all of the other reasons why Kamala wasn't elected president, that was one of the big reasons, which had nothing to do with her competence because she was by far the most competent candidate. But in my time in San Francisco was very formative. I had a chance to have a monthly breakfast with Willie Brown. Now, people, Willie has his supporters, his detractors, but the man is a brilliant tactician, brilliant politician, really has a pulse to this day of what's happening not only in San Francisco and California, but even in New York. Carl Hastie is a big fan of his in New York City. The Speaker of the legislature. So Willie Brown's influence was profound on me, and really helped to develop my political sense and seeing the world through the lens of who you serve. So I had that opportunity. I also feel very blessed. Think about this. I'm the school's chancellor in New York City. I mean, in San Francisco. It's not mayoral control. So the mayor has no authority, at least back then, over the school system. And I go to meetings with Mayor Gavin Newsom and District Attorney Kamala Harris, and all of a sudden we have on the phone our local congressional representative Nancy Pelosi, and we're talking about funding bills. And as a young superintendent, that was my first superintendency. A little starstruck, but once you roll up your sleeves and you get into the conversations, you're talking shop, you're making policy. Who would have thought that this kid from Tucson, Arizona, a Chicano kid from Tucson, Arizona, an English language learner, would one day be sitting in the room in the city hall of San Francisco with all of these other bureaucrats that decades down the road, end up being these national figures. So my experiences with them were very much about local policy and local policies that affected my students in the San Francisco Unified School District, and I got to know them. And what I can say, regardless of whether you agree or disagree with their politics, they very much are focused on serving their constituents and looking at the big picture. It was true then, and as I followed Vice President Harris's trajectory into the presidential race, it was true in everything she was saying on the national stage as well. I just feel very fortunate that I had a chance to interact with them.
So, Chancellor Carranza, you sort of have had a sort of a stroke of luck in taking over jobs. You also took over the job in Houston right after the hurricane or during the hurricane, right? It's the fourth largest city. So you sort of had to walk into a tough situation there as well. Talk about your time in Houston.
Hi, Roberto. So, this may make it so no school board will ever hire me again. But when I was in San Francisco, we had an earthquake we had to manage through. And then when I was in Houston, I was superintendent in Houston. It was the largest school district in the state of Texas, the Houston Independent School District, and I was superintendent during Hurricane Harvey. So we had to prepare, we had to respond, and then we had to rebuild. And I'm very proud of the work that the team did in Houston. Just by comparison, to this day, it is still the largest natural disaster to hit the continental United States in the history of the United States, Hurricane Harvey. And while Hurricane Katrina affected New Orleans public schools took 6 months to come back into session. In Houston, we were able to come back into session within 2 weeks, which once we were back in session, the city could go back to work. We could start the recovery process. So I'm very proud of the work that we did there. Then I go to New York City, and Dios mío,
and we were the only ones that opened. New York City was talk about opening quickly in Houston. New York City was the biggest and the only to reopen back to in-person. So I'll let you tell the story, but I want to take a step back. Tell us how you become the New York City Schools Chancellor, because it was supposed to be Carvalho in Miami.
Yeah,
I want to hear the inside baseball. How does it go from Albert Carvalho, and he has this press conference? I was watching it live.
Okay.
And I was fully expecting for the man to say, I'm coming to the Big Apple. I'll see you in a few. And then it was like a sort of rally for him to turn down the job, which is baffling. But how does it go from that to you?
So again, I'm post Harvey in Houston, and we're cooking on all cylinders. And I get a phone call from the mayor's office of appointments, and they said, our chancellor, Carmen Farina, has announced her retirement. We're in the search process. And as we've been reaching out, your name has surfaced in multiple spaces with multiple people saying, we need to talk to you. Are you interested? So I said, well, sure, let's talk. So one thing led to another. Next thing you know, I'm having a conversation with the chief operating officer in the Department of Ed. I'm having a conversation with deputy mayors in the mayor's office, and then I'm on a plane headed to New York City to meet at Gracie Mansion with the mayor and the first lady, and we had great conversations. And his whole tale of two cities and really wanting to lean into equity very much resonated with my leadership style. So again, I'm in this conversation. I don't know who else is in the conversation, but no me importa. It doesn't matter to me. I'm having this conversation. I'm living my best life. I'm taking pictures at Gracie Mansion. Can you believe this Chicano kid from Tucson is in Gracie? Just in the moment. And then it comes down to I'll never forget. I'm in a meeting in Mayor Sylvester Turner's office in Houston, and we're discussing recapture, which is a funding mechanism in Texas that was going to affect Houston Independent School District. And I get a text, and it's from Mayor Bill de Blasio. So I step out, I go out into the ante room, and it's Mayor de Blasio. I call him back, and he says, Richard, I just want you to know in a few minutes, we're going to announce the new chancellor. and you did a fantastic job. You made the job and the selection very, very difficult, but we're going with somebody else. And I remember thinking to myself, well, I felt like I was treated fair. I felt like I had a good shot. And I said to him, Mr. Mayor, I will always be a champion of the New York City public schools. And congratulations to you for selecting a chancellor. I said, you will have my complete and unfettered support. And then I remember saying to him, but, just curiosity, because Roberto, so a little aside here, the superintendent world is a very small world. We all know each other, especially in the largest school systems in America. We all know each other and we root for each other because, by the spin of the bottle, one day it's going to be your turn to get hit. So, so I was just curious. I said, if you don't mind, who will be the new chancellor? And he said, it's going to be Alberto Carvalho, the superintendent Miami-Dade. I said, Mr. Mayor, couldn't have made a better choice. I know Alberto. He has phenomenal results. He's very articulate. He has a very, very intriguing and very uplifting story. I said, so congratulations. You have my full support. That's it. I go back to my meeting with Mayor Turner. We get done with the meeting, and sure enough, my Twitter at that time starts lighting up with the new announcement of the new chancellor in New York City. Of course I'm disappointed, but I'm also very excited because I think Alberto's going to do a good job. And then I start seeing posts where Alberto hasn't made a statement, and there are no statements of acceptance or I'm excited. I've already thought, man, if I land in New York City, I'm going to be telling everybody I'm excited to come to the Big Apple. I'm ready to go. None of that happened. And as the evening goes on, the drama becomes even more. And then all of a sudden, there's an announcement the next day. There's an emergency school board meeting in Miami-Dade, and and again, no announcement accepting the position. And the next day, yo estoy trabajando. I'm working, so I've got a big speech for the Chamber of Commerce in Houston. So I go up and I'm introduced and I give my speech and I, not to pat myself on the back, but I hit it out of the park because we needed the business community support on this recapture thing. So anyway, I get off stage and I go look at my phone and it's blowing up. And I've got, several text messages from Mayor de Blasio. And I'm thinking, ay, 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 ¿qué está pasando? What's going on here? So I call the mayor and the mayor says, Richard, I don't know if you see what's happening, but, Alberto has declined the position. He says, you are the leading candidate if you're still interested. And I remember this was on a Thursday. And I said, Mr. Mayor, I'm very sorry this has happened, but I'm very interested. Let's talk. He said, how soon can you be in New York City? So I booked a flight, took vacation time. Want to make sure everybody knows that I took vacation time in Houston. Flew to New York City. On a Friday morning, was at Gracie Mansion Friday, Saturday, meetings, back-to-back meetings. On Sunday, the mayor brings out this 3-ring binder. No te miento, it's about 4 to 5 inches thick. They had done the background check on me. And I remember Mayor de Blasio says to me, Richard, I just have to tell you, as he's flipping through the notebook, he says, you've lived a very good life. He says, you've lived a very good life. He says, and we would be honored to have you as our next chancellor. And then it just exploded. I had to negotiate my exit in Houston, and then we had the city council negotiating with our lawyer, and then I had to inform my board members, and then we had to do a press. And then Monday morning, I remember walking into City Hall with the mayor and the first lady, and I'm announced as a new chancellor. It was very much a whirlwind experience, but I would also say very much a New York experience, right? It was a big lights, but that was the story. And I also want to say that to this day, Alberto Carvalho and I are very good friends. And I think one of the things that often happens when you have leaders of color that are in very high profile positions, the public sphere tries to divide you. And can you believe it? This guy came in and took the job after you said no. And remember, that is all a red herring. We can't allow ourselves to be pulled into that kind of a nonsense. And so I'm very glad to say Alberto's just doing a great job in Los Angeles and now as a superintendent. And he and I still talk on a regular basis, and I'm a big fan.
Chancellor Carranza, three proudest moments as the New York City Schools Chancellor. What were your three proudest accomplishments?
I think that for me, the number one was that I feel I was able to connect with communities in New York City, especially the immigrant communities, the Spanish speaking communities, in ways that perhaps those communities had not been connected with before. I still relish memories of walking down the street and the cab driver leaning out of his taxi and saying, "Give them hell, Chancellor," or walking into a bodega to get a little sandwichito in between my meetings, and people, all of the workers stepping out from behind, from the kitchen and saying, "Canciller, qué bueno que estás aquí. Muchas gracias, Canciller. ¿Me puedo tomar una foto? Can I take a picture with you?" I mean, the hope that I think was embodied in a lot of those comments made me very much realize that we connected with some communities. I will forever be grateful to Univision. Also, we had a weekly segment called A la Clase con el Canciller, which I learned after I left New York City, won an Emmy Award for Univision, where weekly we would talk in Espanol to the Spanish speaking community, not about policy, not about highfalutin idea. We talked about the nuts and bolts of how do you enroll your child? How do you go through the lottery system? What should you be asking your teachers of your children when you go to the parent teacher conference? Really nuts and bolts things in Spanish. So I'm very proud of that. The other thing that I'm proud of is that the person that I was, the English language learner, the student that was never supposed to go to college, the mariachi, the person that I was when I walked into Tweed Courthouse, the headquarters of the DOE, the person that I was when I walked in is the person that I was when I walked out. I never deviated from what I believe in, why I believe in it. And, like we say in Spanish, sin pelos en la lengua, right? Which means just plain spoken. I said some things that were very hard for some people to hear. But it was my truth. It was the truth. And I'm very proud that I didn't play the political game and have just a rosy tenure as chancellor. The third thing that I'm proud of is that we set the stage for actually some things that have happened since then. And with all due respect to my subsequent chancellor colleagues and the work that they're doing, we were talking about having less of a wild, wild west atmosphere when it came to math curriculum, when it came to English language arts curriculum. We were talking about increasing and really fighting for increased funding for special groups like students with disabilities, multilingual learners. We started those conversations, and I had lots of those conversations in the halls of Albany. So I think those three things I'm just so proud of in terms of my tenure in New York City.
Three do-overs, three moments that you said, man, if I had another bite at the apple, so to speak, three things you would do over. Maybe even three regrets, if there are any. Three things you say, wow, I could have, sort of the Monday morning quarterback in our own lives. Three things you say to yourself, if I had the opportunity again, I would do this way and not that way.
So I don't live my life as a I woulda, shoulda, coulda kind of guy, but I do reflect a lot. And I think one of the reflections is that, you can never engage communities enough. And I would have spent much more time outside of the bureaucratic process as a lever for change and really embrace the community empowerment, community organizing aspect of a lever for change. And that means going into very diverse communities: the Asian community, the Chinese speaking community, the African American community, the community. So I would have spent much more time in those communities talking about the issues that are very, very important. As a chancellor, you are technically a commissioner within the city of government. in New York City. So there's a lot of things that come with that. So I think that my time was spent a lot on trying to develop those relationships because I wasn't from New York or New York City. So getting those people to understand who I was, where it was valuable, and I don't regret that. I think though that my time could have been better spent in the very communities for whom I was really trying to fight. The other thing that I think, if there was a do-over, is that instead of seeing myself as one of the commissioners within the mayor's team, I would, if I was to do it again, just accept the role that I have. I'm the chancellor. I'm the leader of this school system, so I'm going to do some things and ask for forgiveness rather than ask for permission, and then takes months and months and months for permission to come. I think those two things are the things that I've really reflected on. And by the way, will be a couple of chapters in the book I'm finishing. But anyway, that I think is really important about leading in a large, very complicated, complex organization that is like New York City.
Best day on the job as New York City Schools Chancellor. Best
It
day.
was best day was every day I was in the school. Every day I was in the school. I've got thousands of pictures of me with students and in schools and with teachers and with administrators. Every day I spent in a school was one of my best days in New York City because it immediately cuts through all the bureaucracy, cuts through all the politics. And for me, especially in those hard days where you're trying to push this literally boulder up the hill, the boulder being equitable outcomes for all students, and you have tremendous pushback, and then you go to a school in the Bronx and you see the very children that you are fighting for, and you say, "Yeah, that's exactly why I'm fighting for this." Or you walk into the bodega and you see, a parent come from the kitchen, or they're serving you your coffee, and they say, "Gracias, thank you for what you're doing. My child has never seen a Latino in a suit on TV." And all of a sudden they're looking at me and they're seeing me, y hablo español, and they're saying, mi hijo ya cree que sí puede hacerlo. My child believes they can do that. Those kinds of memories for me are the best part of the job, not only in New York City, but everywhere I've ever served. And I remember them fondly.
Hardest day on the job or worst day, if there is one that you said, man, this is.
It also has to do with students. During my tenure in New York City as chancellor, uh, I met with a minimum of 25 families who had lost a child. Different things, drownings, car accidents. Thank God, never the result of school violence in a school, but just tragic instances. So those were always the hardest day for me. And I still remember one particular day where it was the end of a very long day, and there were several students that had been missing. They were in the East River, and they were kayaking or doing something in the East River, and they had disappeared. And I was in touch with the NYPD, and they were keeping me posted. And sure enough, later that evening, about 10:30 at night, I get the call that they had found one of the students' bodies, and that then later, shortly after that, they found the second student. And I remember getting in the vehicle and having my escorts take me to the family so I could give them my condolences on behalf of the school system. Those were the hardest days because not only were families losing their children, but I was losing children that I considered to be my responsibility. Those were the hardest days. And again, Roberto, I'm going to say, and it's just a personal anecdote here. I wasn't blessed to have been born in New York City. I didn't have family in New York City, so I was in New York City kind of by myself. So when those days where you can depend on and lean on family members and have a shoulder to cry on, I often had an almohada that I was crying on, and those were the toughest days for me because, again, for all of the reasons that I talked about, you never want to experience those kinds of situations. And as bad as it was for me to have to deal with those situations, it was multiple times worse for the families that had lost a loved one. Those were the tough days.
Dan, so you talk about the sort of the folks you had an opportunity to work with in San Francisco, from Vice President Kamala Harris to Willie Brown to Gavin Newsom to Nancy Pelosi. Who stood out in your mind in New York City? I know you lobbied a whole lot up in Albany. You had to testify, mayoral accountability, mayoral control, right? Specialized high schools. There was a lot of things, money, funding. We had then Governor Andrew Cuomo, who, it was a lot. It was a tough time, and it was a lot of work. The IDC, divided Senate, etc. But I'll let you tell me who were some of the people that stood out in your mind in terms of, who you worked with, who impressed you.
Yeah. So for me, the elected officials were always very cordial. Most of the time, they were cordial. There was one city council member and his lackey that pretended to get hit by my car one time. Like they were a joke. That was a joke. They were a joke. They were caricatures on a cartoon show. Uh, but the people that really impressed me were the advocates that had for decades been, yelling into a void, and nobody was listening to them. And oh yeah, they protest everything. Oh yeah, they have a policy position. Yeah, oh yeah. And I remember that when I arrived in New York City, and these recommendations that were coming from a working group that the mayor had created to give us recommendations on how to desegregate the school system. Imagine that, 71 years after Brown versus Board of Education this year, we're still talking about desegregating school systems, and the largest school system in America. We're talking about desegregating, and the segregation is kind of de facto. It's kind of built into the very fabric of the system and structures. And I remember that I came in as this new chancellor, and I sat with advocates, and I sat with parents and community-based organizations, and I heard the pain in their voice, where they didn't want something for their child at the expense of another child. They wanted the best for all children. And I remember that they impressed me because they were resilient, they were dedicated, and they were so darn articulate about what it meant to them. That being said, trying to carry those voices to the halls of the legislature in Albany is what gave me a lot of energy to be able to articulate even closely what the beautiful things these parents and advocates had said to me was always what I carried with me. How do I do justice for them? Because I get to sit at this table. How do I articulate at the table these particular ideas and passions? That being said, there were some really good actors on the city council that got it. There were some really good actors in the community that got it. There were numbers of principals and assistant principals and assistant superintendents you know and family liaisons that got it. Those were the people that I always remember. Um, in terms of politicians, look, I don't want to be negative about this, but as a man of color, I don't get to take the skin off at night. I don't take the skin off when I walk into a department store and I'm not dressed as a chancellor and I get followed in a department store. I don't get to take the skin off when I arrive at an airport and I see customs people look at me up and down and wonder if I'm still waiting for them to ask me for my citizenship. I know exactly what I'm going to say. But anyway, I am who I am. And what pains me is that during the time that we were fighting for educational equity in New York City, think about this: the leaders of the Senate and the Assembly were African American elected officials, man and a woman, African American. And when you present the data over years of exclusionary policies that exist in some of the schools in New York City, and they have the ability to rally their people to not change the law, just repeal the law. And they were unwilling to do that because of political, I think, and I'm going to give them the benefit of the doubt, political ramifications, rather than I hope they didn't just feel that Black kids and brown kids don't have a seat at some of these schools, was very disappointing to me. Because again, 71 years, and at the time it was 65 years post Brown versus Board of Education, where we have the ability now to elect people that have shared lived experiences. To me, it was anathema that someone would take a leadership position in the face of all of the evidence and then fall back to the usual tropes that, well, they just got to work harder. Oh, they just got to, it's a school systems issue. So that for me was disappointing. but that was buoyed by the fact that there were so many parents and people that felt the effects of these policies that were so articulate about explaining why it was important to change them.
I want to wrap this up, Chancellor, but now we're going to go into a lightning round.
Yeah.
What advice would you give a 21-year-old Richard Carranza?
Take care of your health. When I walked into the chancellorship in New York City versus the time I walked out, I was 164 pounds heavier when I walked in than when I walked out. And I wish I could tell you I found a new diet, I found a new workout routine. No, what I found was incredible stress. What I found was working 24/7. That it had a deleterious effect on my health back then. I'm happy to say that's all changed, but the physical effects are real. So I would have told the 21-year-old, don't put yourself in that position. You can't take care of others if you don't take care of yourself.
3 most influential books you've ever read.
Seven
That
Habits of
changed the way you view. Go ahead. I'm sorry. That changed the way you view the world and informed you as a person.
7 Habits of Highly Effective People by Stephen Covey. I still live by that every single day. The history of Abraham Lincoln, because talk about somebody that had an uphill battle. And then the last book, and again, I don't want to get too personal here, but is the Bible. Bible's not a history, but for me, it's been kind of a book of examples of how to lead and how to turn the other cheek, if you will. So I would say those 3 books continue to be very influential in my life, both professional and personal.
3 things you want to be remembered for.
Number 1, there's a song by one of my favorite Mexican singers, Vicente Fernandez, que en paz descanse. And one of the songs he sang was No me sé rajar, which loosely translated means I just don't know how to quit. I want to be remembered as the chancellor that just didn't quit, that said what he had to say. Number 2, I want to be remembered, and this isn't always talked about because I was known for fighting for equity, but I also want to be remembered for my educational pedagogical chops. I was talking about curriculum. I was talking about moving funding systems and having a unified curriculum in math and science. We were talking about wraparound supports for students with disabilities and multilingual learners. We were organizing ourselves around those concepts, which, again, when you organize around concepts that are pedagogically sound, sometimes the adults that are tied to the old way of doing things don't like that. So I want to be remembered for that. And then the third thing I want to be remembered for is that that bodega worker, that cab driver, that construction worker that met me, maybe saw me on TV a lot, but met me for the first time in person. I want to be remembered that they say, no era egoísta. He didn't have an ego. He was a nice guy. He was one of us. That's what I want to be remembered for, because that's who I am.
What advice would you give a potential incoming mayor? Let's say conceivably, Mayor Adams does not get a second term. He's still the mayor. He's in the race. What advice would you give a potential or new mayor?
Look at the long game. Don't look at the short game. And the long game is this. If you're going to be mayor for all 9 million residents of New York City. Be the mayor that not only paints the vision for where the city should be and has to be, but actually enables the people that you bring in to do the work to make that vision a reality. And that means that sometimes it's going to be difficult. People are going to push back. You're going to have initiatives that are going to be antithetical to your political career, perhaps. But nobody's born a mayor. Nobody's born a chancellor. And you're not going to die a mayor. You're not going to die a chancellor. So while you're in the seat, do the work to empower, enable, and make life better for those people you represent while you have that opportunity. That would be my advice to any incoming mayor. And then, let's also be very, very clear. There are spaces that we're still not welcomed. Even though we're elected or we're appointed, we're still not welcome in those spaces because we don't have perhaps the ticket that gets us to those spaces. But here we are. So once we're there, let's do the work to serve all students, all residents, not just some.
Mr. Carranza, thank you. Anything you want to add that I forgot to ask you that you want to say?
I think I'm going to quote Winston Churchill that the democracy is the worst form of government of all governments,
Wow.
except
Thank,
for all governments, except for all other forms of government. So
thank you.
I believe in our democracy, and education is the cornerstone of our democracy.
Thank you so much, Chancellor. All the best and continued success. Talk soon.
Great to see you, Roberto. Thank you.
Likewise.